parts of the world, other time zones, maybe good morning or good afternoon. And today we've got another interesting session, which is the session for the March, and we've got Mackenzie Nichols. He's going to be taking us through a very unique one. There's nobody else who could present to us on the topic he's planned for us. He's just the perfect person for what he has planned for us. I'll be doing this intro, which is happening right now, and hopefully by 8:05, I'll hand over to him, and he's going to take the entire remaining 55 minutes. And maybe at the end, I just say thank you and bye. Okay, so next, this is a monthly webinar series, which means we're doing the Feb one, no, March one. We had the Feb one. In case you missed the Feb one, I'll probably share the YouTube link of where you can access it. And next month, I'll be the one presenting on creating AI agents using LangChain and LangGraph. So it's one of the newest things I've picked up, and I feel like I need to share it with you before the space becomes too crowded and there's too much to learn that cannot be taught in 1 hour. And in May, we'll have Venu Amancha, who's going to tell us about building enterprise data lake and data warehouse using Lucid Data Hub AI. And to today's session and speaker, so Mackenzie is the supervisor of the City of Toronto's Open Data Program. And I have used the Open Data Portal, and that's why when you reached out and was like, "Oh, you would like to present to us," it was like Christmas came early for me. I was so happy because I've benefited from it, and I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm not aware of that you are not aware of that I will learn from his session today. I'm going to share the city's portal also in chat and his LinkedIn in case you want to connect with him and get to see whatever he posts. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to him so that he has the whole hour. So Mackenzie, over to you. I'm going to turn off my camera. And if there are any questions, I'll be watching, so I might signal you at some point that there are some questions. But thanks, over to you, Mr.
Yeah,
Shea.
perfect. Michael, thank you. Hello, everybody. I hope we're all having a good morning, day, evening, whatever it is. My name is Mackenzie, but when we get to chatting, you can call me Mac. Like Michael said, I'm the supervisor of the City of Toronto's Open Data Program. Communities like this often know what that program does, what our open data portal is, but what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about what that program is, what that portal is, show you how it looks, how it feels, how it works, and hopefully have a bunch of time for questions, either about the portal or the program or whatever it is that y'all are interested in. Um, I am sharing my screen. Michael, can you just let me know if you can see my screen still?
Yes, clear,
Perfect.
visible.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm going to be talking for a long time. I'm joking. I'll be talking for a little bit. As we go through, I will be chunking this presentation out into 4 parts, talking a little bit about who the people are on our team, the product that we maintain, this website called the Open Data Portal, who uses that portal and how they use the portal, and then some of the issues and challenges that our program is day to day and big picture. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look to, you know, get as many questions from you all as I can as I go and at the end. So I will be stopping frequently and like probing for questions. And if there are none, that's great. If there are, that's even better. And I'll also look to have a bunch of time at the end to answer questions too. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Uh, Before I actually get into the makeup of our team, I think it's important first to level set. Um, the Open Data Program is a program in the City of Toronto. It is part of the city bureaucracy. We work in the city's IT division. We're called Technology Services. And everything that we do, therefore, is government work. We're a team of 7. We got 3 software developers, I think a couple of which are on the call today. Um, we've got a service designer, somebody who helps us design some of the more complicated user experience issues that we have. Things that are poorly defined, she helps us define them. We've got a policy analyst since we have a open data policy, like rules basically that we have to follow. We've got a supervisor, that's me. We have a project manager. He helps crack the whip to make sure that we're staying on track of stuff. And this team of 7 helps to manage a couple of things. We've got data sets and code bases associated with our website. The website I'll show you later, open.toronto.ca. We also manage a couple of ETL engines, things that are moving data from one spot over to another. I guess I'm in Data Engineers Toronto. I don't need to explain what ETL is. I'm sorry, everybody. That's a habit. I present to a lot of different kinds of folks. But we also manage a Twitter, a blog, and an inbox, open data at toronto.ca, all of which we monitor on the regular. That's easy, right? Let's talk a little bit then about what the product is that this team manages, what this portal is that I've been alluding to. Open.toronto.ca. It's a website, but we're pretty proud of this website in that to use its full functionality, it is free. There is no money involved ever. You never need to set up an account. You do not need to get permissions. You do not need to ask to do anything. On this site, you just go and you do the thing. What is the thing? Well, the website provides data to folks as download and via API, depending on the nature of that data set. And the data that you access through this open data portal is for anybody, for any purpose. That includes commercial, that includes making money. And use of this data is protected by our open data license, and we've got folks who are already currently using that data for commercial reasons and for all kinds of other reasons too. That's the idea behind the website, but why talk about it when I can show it? And so that's what I'm hoping to do right now. Again, if anybody's curious, feel free to follow along on the screen, but feel free to also open up your own browser and navigate to open.toronto.ca. That's our website. When you go there, you're going to get a splash page in which you can get, you can search for whatever it is that may be tickling your fancy that day. Things about water, things about police services, things about opioid overdoses, things about where the public bathrooms are, where the green spaces are in the city of Toronto, all kinds of stuff. If it's authored and managed by the City of Toronto bureaucracy, a lot of it is going to be here. And so what we do is when you search, brings you to a catalog page that looks something like this, and it will show you lists of different data sets that you can investigate and download. If you select one of these data sets, it brings you to a data set page in which you will get a couple of things. You will get lots of contextual information, metadata about the particular data set that you've clicked into, information about how often this data set is refreshed, what type of data, what category does it fall into. If I had to categorize that even further by subject matter or topic, how would I put that together? Is there a place somewhere on the internet where I can learn more about this particular thing? Am I a bit legally minded and need to learn more about the license that protects me from using this data? Or do I have like a subject matter specific question and need to get in touch with an expert? All that stuff is here for you, as well as a plain English definition of what, in this case, Toronto Island ferry ticket counts is referring to. But that's not all. We'll also provide users with a preview of the data that they're about to download, kind of like a sample of the thing you're about to acquire. We'll also give people plain English definitions, metadata on the attribute level for each attribute or column in that data. We also allow people to obviously download that data in many different formats. And depending on the nature of that data, if it is non-spatial like the previous data set or spatial like this data set I've navigated to here, we'll also make that preview into something spatially oriented. And we'll change those downloads such that they are in spatial formats, downloadable in multiple different projections, coordinate reference systems for those of us who are spatially minded. Now, in addition, there are a couple other things that this website will enable folks to do. I've glossed over one of them that people always tend to get excited about, and that's our concept of a data quality score. Our data quality score is a very subjective thing. It is us, the open data team's best swing at giving users an idea of any kinds of mostly metadata level issues associated with a data set. The grades are simple. We got gold, silver, and bronze. Gold, of course, being the best, bronze being the worst. We never say if something is if something is bronze, that you should ignore it. But we do give this as a bit of a, in our own words, a sniff test to give you an idea of like, oh, hey, like type of considerations should I be making when I access this data? I'll talk a bit more about data quality if anybody's interested, but at a high level, we basically look at 5 different simple kinds of metrics. Each of these metrics are things that we've defined and we've selected based off of what we as the Open Data Program want to keep an eye on, things that we know in talking with the communities that we serve and in dealing with our own problems as bureaucrats ourselves that have to work in this world of data, what we want to keep an eye on. For example, one of those buckets of metrics is called freshness. Basically, that checks if data is up to date. And we've got a bunch of different rules that you can learn about here that checks how fresh a particular data set is. Happy to talk about this more, but that's the high level. And if anyone wants to learn more about this, we've got a whole section of our website dedicated to explaining this data quality score. Now, on that note, and the last thing that I'll show as in talking about this whole data set and talking about us explaining our data quality score, we've got a blog where we will talk about certain things that are either front of mind when it comes to open data. We like to publicize what we're up to. We like to share stories from users, members of the community who have taken an open data set and either made a product with it or done an analysis with it. We'll do this with students. We'll do this with meetup groups like this one. We'll do this with all kinds of groups. And we'll also talk about, for example, big changes we made to the site. Like when we upgraded our data quality score last, we made a whole article about our data quality score, which is buried in here somewhere. Now, we use that data quality score, of course, to monitor data quality, and that's important to us because we also like to monitor the different products that are being that are leveraging our open data. And we do that in this page that I've accessed just now, called our gallery page. And in the gallery page, we like to show off the different use cases that we know of that are using open data. And there's a bunch. And so I recommend, especially for folks, especially for folks who are not sold on the idea or the value of open data, I definitely recommend that you come here and show those folks this. But that's that. I will pause for a moment and ask the crowd if there are any questions.
So in your metadata, do you have the sources from where you get the data itself?
In a way, we have a lot of that internally, but only some of that externally. Excuse me, I've accidentally jumped around. So if I go back to one of those pages, we will tell you where the data was published from based on a city division. City's made of a lot of different divisions, like the police department, like the fire department, like the library, and we'll tell you which division that data came from. But if you're looking for something more specific, like the specific infrastructural name of the database it came from, we do have that, but we don't share that, mostly for security reasons. I hope that answers your question, man.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Right. Okay, and everybody, don't worry. There's gonna be a lot of opportunities to ask questions if you have them. I'm gonna stop a couple more times as we go. But that's enough of the demo. Let's talk about the website behind the scenes a little bit. I can imagine there's gonna be some people in this crowd who are a little more technically minded, so I'd like to pull back the curtain a little bit for them. Our website's got a couple different layers to it. What you just saw, open.toronto.ca, is that blue box on the right-hand side of this very oversimplified or very simple infrastructure diagram. It's our portal. It is a WordPress with a little bit of custom JavaScript and a custom WordPress theme on it. And that provides us with that user interface I was just clicking through that allows people to easily download and read a blog. It allows some of our non-technical staff to publish said blogs and manage things easily without having to be front-end developers themselves. Behind that, though, is where a lot of the work happens. Behind that, though, we have a Python-based, a Flask middleware. I use that term lightly, called CCAN. It's a open source, commonly used, especially in government level open data, but not just government, application that allows us to store, manage, and provide data and metadata fairly easily. In that CCAN application, we've got both the ability to provide that data in a file dump via APIs that are made out of the box via some APIs that we've made ourselves and extending CCAN. And therefore, the infrastructure for that has a database from which some of those records are stored, and then a file store where a lot of those associated files are stored. CCAN is how we provide API endpoints to more technical users where they may not want to use the interface, and we don't want to force our users to have to like scrape a site. We just want to give them an easy to use API. CCAN enables us to do that. CCAN is where we store data that comes through a number of different ETL pipelines. We have 3 applications. We have 3 for a number of different historic and network related reasons. We'd love to have 2 or even 1. We know that that would do the job just as well, because all 3 of these different tools, Apache Airflow, Apache NiFi, and FME, while they're not the same, we're using them to do fairly similar stuff, and we'd love to have just 1. But anyway, you know, history has happened, and so we have 3. Those different engines reach into the various different data, let's call them repositories because they're not all databases, all the various different places where data is stored in the city bureaucracy. And there's a variety of those that require a variety of different integrations. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but those different applications constitute for us, I'm kind of fudging the number here, but somewhere between 200 and 300 different distinct ETL jobs that we manage. Once those ETL jobs run and once we put the data up on that portal, yeah, sure, we can provide it sometimes via an API. And that data, you know, would come from a database into the client's browser or wherever it is that they're making the request from. But a lot of times when people just come to the website and they just want to click to download, they want a download that happens right away. And so we don't want to have to force people to wait while an application is translating data from its source database into one of the various different file formats or even coordinate reference systems that I was showing you just a minute ago. So we've also got hidden into that CCAN application I was just making reference to. We've also got some work that will cache files in all those different formats and all those different coordinate reference systems, so that when people come and they click download, it's not like, hey, click download and we'll give you a phone call in 15 minutes when the thing's ready. It's like, no, click download and it's going to start right away because it's there sitting waiting for you. That's a high level on the portal. I'll pause again for questions before I start talking about who uses our portal and how. Right. So let's talk a little bit about usership. So the purpose of the Open Data Program is to share data, hard stop. And it's to share data that gets authored and managed by city staff behind the big city curtain, right? Hard to get through. When we do that, we're sharing data with the public. Of course, it's a public-facing website. Again, you don't need an account. You don't need to pay any money. You can come from anywhere in the world as long as you got the internet. You come, you click, you grab what you need. But we also, by happenstance, use the portal to share data internally. We use the portal to move data around within the city bureaucracy. And when I first learned that, I thought that was wild. But then when I really thought about it, it makes sense. You're not supposed to be able to read this slide. Don't worry. Don't try to. It's just going to hurt your eyes. The point behind this slide is to explain that the city bureaucracy in Toronto is pretty big and messy. You got to understand, and a lot of you probably already know this, but the city of Toronto is big and fairly old. And it's got multiple different lines of businesses, multiple different, we call them divisions, that do very different things. And they have for a very long time. You got to understand, for example, the library does business very differently than the police department, than paramedics, than city clerks. These are all different groups, all different divisions within the city that need to somehow work together. But because their use cases are so different, they have speciated, mutated into their own distinct corporations, all doing their best to work together, but all definitely doing business in fairly different ways. And that's an important thing to understand, because when you're one of those divisions, when you're working at the city bureaucracy, and this isn't unique to the city, by the way, any of you all here who work in a large organization, corporate, NGO, whatever, you've probably seen different flavors of this. Each unit, each division in city parlance, but each different organization or department in any large organization becomes their own corporation. And over time, they develop their own data management practices. And when the organization gets big enough, you've got all kinds of sharing problems. Sometimes it's data formats and a lack of hard skills to deal with that variety. Sometimes it's very real networking and security issues. Sometimes it's metadata. Sometimes it's just not knowing what is where because the organization you're at is so vast. I'm sure you all have seen different flavors of this in your different lines of work. And that's what's kind of convenient about open data is while our goal is to share data with the world, we also are in a position where anybody who works at the city also has access to the internet and therefore has access to open.toronto.ca. And so we have ended up, and probably not on purpose, but it's ended up coming here, um, to being a platform that shares data from divisions to the portal and then to other divisions, as well as from divisions to the open data portal and out to anybody else in the public. And that's great because that enables us to enable a lot of other folks. Sure, a lot of them are city divisions who are now able to do their own work, who now, when they want to share data with the public, be it through dashboards or raw data dumps, they now have a platform to do it. They just go through us, they fill out a ticket with us, and we take care of the rest. But it also enables people out in the public to do projects and do their meaningful work with that data. I was making reference to our gallery, open.toronto.ca/gallery. If you want to see some of the known, more concrete, more recent use cases of our data. But there's a list on here of a bunch of others that are a little bit harder to characterize and sometimes a little bit older, so that we haven't put all of that up on our gallery page. One asterisk I do want to make about this, and thank you for sharing all that in the chat, Michael. One of the things I do want to make reference about this, and I don't think I've got, one of the challenges actually that we'll face, and I realize now that it's not our challenges section, but one of the challenges that we face when it comes to understanding who's using our data is that, well, we can't really, not automatically at least, we don't have a way to require people to come onto the portal and tell us what they're doing with the data. Sure, we could have a form pop up. Sure, we could ask folks like, hey, what did you use this data for today? We've been cautious about that because we know it decreases the quality of the user experience. But we also know that a lot of people just aren't going to fill it out because it's how they do business. They don't want to fill out a form every time they hit download. So one of the great weaknesses, really the true double-edged sword of the open data program, is that because we are a program that gives data out to whoever for whatever reason, and we don't ask you to pay us or to make an account, we don't know who's downloading our data. We know, of course, how much of a particular data set gets downloaded. We know when it gets downloaded. And even in some cases, we know on the internet came from, where that request for that came from before they landed on a particular page. And that's all great. But I still can't tell you in a lot of cases automatically what they plugged that data into. If they a dashboard or some type of separate ETL or to their website or to some study that they wrote. We can only do that through interactions like this. And that's part of the reason why we like coming to these types of meetups, because we get to meet folks who, like Michael, who I didn't know had used the Open Data Portal before I met him or started speaking to him. We get to meet people who have actually used the Open Data Portal. And that's like largely out of necessity. We have no way of knowing who people are when they come and use it. And that's great because that's by design. But we still want to know. Talking about challenges, we've got plenty more. I could probably spend another 3 hours talking about challenges, but I won't. I will spend only a couple minutes. Before I jump into challenges, though, any questions about our usership or any of the slides I've just presented beforehand?
Yeah, maybe just to ask you as you were mentioning that, not to detract from the user experience. That's why it's not that it's because of any technological restrictions. It's just more if you want to make people encouraged to just get the data they need. So I was just thinking, have you come across other cities where somehow they've figured out how to get this information and maybe not to detract from the user experience? I'm just thinking because I'm guessing it might also be very useful for you because, the way I mentioned that I've used the data to build a dashboard around the transit system, which even when I showed it to the people that I did a training for and they could relate to it, and people were telling me to click here and click there, and they wanted to see more, and they were surprised that I got all of these, by without paying, and it was openly available. So just wanted to ask if maybe there might be a way to get some of those insight and might be useful for you if you figured out some places that already have a way to get those insights.
Yeah, Michael, that's a good point. And the short answer is we haven't seen anything that has excited us enough to action it. We're lucky in that the open data community, not just folks on the ground using the data, but city bureaucrats like me who make and manage portals, we keep in touch pretty well. I've been every month I'll speak with the different large Canadian open data portals um, about all kinds of issues. One of which has been that: how do we understand our usership? The best answer we've come up with is to ask folks and ask them nicely. And sometimes they'll tell us, and sometimes they won't. The alternative to that, though, is what I'm doing here, which is where I come out and talk to folks. And sometimes it's electronic, and they'll mention things in the chat, or they'll mention things they've done, like you have, Michael. But other times it's meeting people in person, and they've said, "Oh, hey, I've used this." So it's that's my long answer. The short answer is there's not like a silver bullet that we found, even in looking at other open data organizations. The one that people use is a form, and maybe we'll get tempted into it someday. But we will want to execute it properly and definitely not make it like a requirement or anything to get in people's way when they download data.
Thanks. So someone is asking, Raji is asking, how often is the data updated?
Good question, Raji. The short answer is it depends. We've got on our portal something over 500 different distinct data sets. Each data set is going to be updated with a different frequency. You can find that in our refresh rate section in our portal. And when I go to a particular data set page, like this one I was looking at before around Toronto Island Ferry ticket counts, you'll see that this one is refreshed real time. So for this specific one, every hour. But it's not always so often. If I go to another data set that we've got around the lobbyist registry, this one is updated once a day. But there are plenty of others that are updated much less frequently, monthly or annually as well. So short answer is it depends, man.
Thank you.
Hey Mac. So is there some sort of governance policies around, internal departments versus public-facing data sets as to, if there's some departments having access to certain data? I'm sure there are some internal data sets that are not exposed to the public. So having a same backend for everything, how do you govern that?
Yeah, great question. So right now, based off of or because of the size and the not craziness, but let's call it size of all this, of the different divisions that we do not have such a single central repository for all of the divisions in the city of Toronto's data. It's something that the city is trying to get done, but it's not something that's going to get done today, tomorrow, this year, next year. It is actually conveniently, it's something that our sister team is working on, but that's not ready yet. So what we do is we have to really work with each division individually, form relationships with them, and understand their comfort levels and their systems and how they do business. And in doing that, we have to work with them to figure out, all right, well, what kind of governance, what kind of privacy concerns do you have, and get to understand all those before we publish anything.
Got it.
We have to be really, really mindful of privacy. There are data sets that get close to but do not cross any privacy lines, and that's because we have to be very, very strict about it. Fortunately, there's a whole section of the city dedicated to addressing privacy concerns. And so whenever we get into murky waters about, oh, is this a possible PII, personally identifiable information concern or not, we've got experts that we can rely on for that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to like asking the question, hey, should this data set be published? It's up to the individual division that owns the data to make that call themselves.
Got it.
Sorry, how do as an individual, like, request for any kind of a data? Do you have any governance and like process to request for a new data? And also, how do you manage the quality of the data, like, as a public, if somebody is using it, like if they would like to report the quality of the data?
Great question. So 2 answers. One, how do people make requests for data? For folks that are outside the city and they want to see something new or an update maybe to something that's existing, you send us an email, opendata@toronto.ca. We've got a full-time staff whose job is to keep an eye on that, and we triage those, and where applicable, we turn those into data sets. Now, one thing that I'll mention, do not hesitate to send requests to that inbox. There's always somebody who's going to be actioning that, and quite often. You should never, ever, ever hesitate. We get lots of requests all the time, and we're able to action many, many, many of them. However, when you make a request for data, I advise a couple of things to make sure that request gets taken seriously. First, make sure that the data you're asking for doesn't already exist in the portal. It's fine if you ask us for something that does exist. It's just, a waste of your time, right? You're waiting for us to reply to your email, and we just send you a link to something that already exists. Second, keep in mind that sometimes we will publish where we can, where we're allowed. We will publish a data set, but sometimes we might redirect you to make something called an FOI, or a Freedom of Information Request. The slight difference between a data set and an FOI request is an FOI request is when you, for example, want all of the emails between city councilors and lobbyists pertaining to, I don't know, FIFA, the FIFA games coming next year. That's cool, but that might not necessarily be a data set. That might actually just be a very niche dump of emails that you get from a particular division. And you can make those requests. You can do that. There's a whole other team at the city that makes those FOI requests. I only say that to be mindful about what you're asking for. Is when people make the request, they got to be mindful. Is what I'm asking for a thing, most usually tabular, a tabular data thing that can be used and reused for a number of different use cases? Or am I asking for something that's very niche and is processed information like emails? Because those are 2 different things. Now, you asked about governance. When we get those requests, we will triage them, and we'll be in touch with both the requester and the different city divisions associated with the data you're asking about to see, like, hey, are we allowed to do this? Are we allowed to publish this data? Where does it live? How do we make the connection to the data source? So on and so forth. But when that request finally gets made, we've got a whole section of our website dedicated to tracking those requests. When somebody makes a request and it's been finally plugged into our system, you will see that pop up here. You will be able to, for each request, get a brief definition of what that request is asking for, get an idea of who in the city that request has been made to, and understand its particular status. So for this data, somebody asked us for 2025 city budget, pre-budget consultation information. So basically, people are looking for, like, some of the surveys that were sent out, asking about the budget for 2025 before the budget was finalized. We received that request in late January, and we've been waiting on the owner division since we got that request in late January. Waiting on that owner division to actually check on their end to say, hey, does that data exist? Is there other things we need to do, other considerations we need to make? We've got a whole section for that. So if you do make a request and you're like, hey, like, where is my, I asked about Presto card access. I wanted a data set on that. Where is that? You can come in here, click, and see, like, okay, well, I made the request on, who made a request on Christmas Eve? Good golly. But then you can see at what stage in the pipeline it's at. And in this case, another data set that is waiting on the owner division to actually publish that. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but I hope it answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. I do have the follow-up question on that, like quality of the data.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you for reminding me. I talked so long, I forgot about the second question. So yeah, we do have a metric of data quality. Now, it's important, I'll repeat, what we track is mostly metadata quality. We are looking to make sure that data is up to date, has the proper context. is accessible, isn't missing anything obvious, and is usable. When it comes to deeper dives of data quality, we put the onus for that onto the city division. We will enforce some very basic data quality stuff, very, very basic. I'm talking making sure that dates, things that they tell us are dates, are actually containing dates. Data type enforcement, basically. And when it comes to certain spatial things, we'll also enforce some very basic requirements about the type of spatial data that gets provided. That said, we, as the open data team, we are not subject matter experts on these things. I can't tell you too much about the Toronto Island Ferry tickets. I can't tell you too much about the lobbyist registrar and their work in the lobbyist registry. So if they were to give us that data, we do not take responsibility for checking all of the contents to make sure that they are accurate. That also falls onto the division because they are the subject matter experts, and we as the open data team couldn't possibly pick up that expertise. I hope that is what you're referring to when you're talking about data quality.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I see there's another question in the chat from Miguel. Is there any Toronto government division that is using these data? I mean, improving internal processes, new findings, etc. Yeah, there's a bunch in two ways. So there are some city divisions that will use this portal as like their dumping spot for data sets that they want out in the public. In fact, that's what most of them are doing. But then a lot of other divisions will grab that data and use it because it's a lot easier to use it off the portal than it is to go directly to that division. One use case that I see quite a bit is around our data for, let me dig it up. It is the development applications data. So there's a couple of divisions at the city associated with building buildings. While the city is not we do not build our own buildings, or at least not many of them. We are in the business of making sure that land is being used for the appropriate purpose, determining what that purpose is, and then giving the right people the right permissions to actually buy that land and build on it appropriately. Part of that process involves something called a development application, wherein people can see what types of development developers want to do in a plot of land. There are a lot of city divisions who want to get their hands on this stuff. Toronto Building, City Planning. Oh, there's a third one I can't remember. They just changed their name. The Housing Secretariat is the fourth one. There are a number of different divisions who care about this stuff because it's talking about who's building what, where, and when. And that's huge in the city of Toronto. And so we've got all kinds of folks who will dig into this one to better understand what they're using and why. In addition to that, we also republish, and sorry, now I'm just going off the top of my head. We also publish data on the profiles of different neighborhoods in the city. These are going to be data from StatScan that has been repurposed to fit different neighborhood blocks within the city of Toronto. And a lot of different city divisions looking to do all kinds of different spatial analyses of spaces within the city will rely on that. Because what we're providing is just as good as what you're going to get anywhere else. And it's a lot easier to get it from us than it is to go digging through some other organization or go behind the firewall or go direct to StatsCan or something like that. Those are just the ones that I have off the top of my head, Miguel. There are probably others. And we actually face that same issue with understanding what public users are doing with their data that we do with behind the scenes users. The only advantage that we have is we know that, and this is just based off of web analytics and the IPs that are making requests to our web page. We know that about 10 to 20% of our usership can be internal staff at any given time. We don't always know what they're doing, just we only know what they're doing based off the conversations we have with our colleagues at the City of Toronto. I'm sorry, another very long answer, but I hope that covers it, Miguel.
Thank you.
Okay, last section, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about the program and all the boo-boos and challenges and stuff that we have to deal with, or rather that we have to deal with future tense and present tense. There's three big ones. Real talk, there's more. But these are the three big ones that are easiest to describe and are perennial, consistent, that we're going to be addressing over the next little bit. The first, scaling ETLs. I referenced a little bit earlier that there are somewhere between 200 and 300 different distinct ETL jobs that we manage. And we do that with, depending on how you characterize it, 2 half staff. So we're doing a pretty good job of making that like a low input, high output type of thing. And that's okay, because the jobs that we have to do for ETL are fairly simple most of the time. It's copy the data from the left-hand side, process it very lightly, and put it up on the portal. So that's pretty easy. However, as our program grows, and as more and more city divisions want to publish their data, and that's definitely where we see the trend going, as more divisions want to publish things, we are getting new kinds of systems and new kinds of problems and new kinds of things that we have to be able to wrangle. And we've done a pretty good job of making a machine that just handles making new ETLs very, very easily. You fill out the config, you plug it into the machine, and it does the rest of the work. You'll only hear from it when it fails. However, as we expand out and work with more and more of those 40 plus different city divisions that we have to work with, and different teams on those divisions who are doing business in even more different ways, we're finding use cases that we were not ready for. To boot, as we are doing that, we're also finding not only the shape and size and variety of data and location of the data is different, but the size is growing. And that's okay. That's something we should expect. But one of the things we've actually put a lot of effort into late last year and early this year is enabling ourselves to provide larger data sets out to people in the public. We had a lot of issues when it came to dealing with large, especially spatial data sets and transforming them into the different file types that spatial analysts like to use. And so only this year we've been able to really handle a lot of that. And then when I talk about variety, we're getting more, like we've been so used to dealing with typically tabular from a database or similar data sets that we're starting to deal with some of the murkier depths of some of the more the older systems that are working with either more nested or more ambiguous data structures. And so we have to get a little bit better at operating with those. Related to that, because this program is dealing with that variety, and it has been for a while, we've got a lot of old garbagey stuff up on that portal. There's a lot of good stuff. I'd say most of it's good, but there's still some garbage up there. Stuff that hasn't been updated in years, where the data owners have left and we cannot find them. Stuff that we consider stale. There are data sets that have inconsistencies, where there might be a version of it that looks like this and another version of it that's similar, that overlaps, but it's not the same, and it looks like that. And there's a couple. There are definitely pockets of data sets that are like that we try to wrangle with more and more. That's part of the benefit of that data quality scoring. As much as it's useful for people in the public who want to take that sniff test, it's also useful for us because it puts a really big target on the back of certain data sets that we know are out of date, are missing context, who do not have that metadata that we want it to have. And that actually becomes a pain point for us because as we are growing, just like any other catalog out in the public, as we grow the catalog, as it gets bigger and bigger, it's really easy to forget about some of the data sets that fell under the couch and they get old and moldy and stinky. And for us, that's fine, but it's also unnecessary compute that's being consumed and people who are using that data set not realizing that it's old and icky and that there might be something better. So it's not only damaging for us as engineers managing a platform, but it's also decreasing the quality of the user experience too. And lastly, talking about user experience, one of the struggles that we have is user research, and I've talked about that a whole ton today. We don't have a perfect line of sight or omniscience into who's using the portal and how, and therefore we also don't have omniscience into how people are struggling with the portal. To that end, we've started doing a lot more outreach to civic technology groups and meetups like this one, and a couple of universities, all groups of people who we know can or do use our portal. And to that end, we've been doing some questionnaires. Some of them, some of the user research we've been doing in person when it allows. This group is all online, so we've made a questionnaire. If you got time, it takes like 10-15 minutes. It's just some basic questions about, have you used the portal? What did you like? What didn't you like? And please, 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 ladies and gentlemen, if anyone does take the 10-15 minutes to actually fill that out, do not be too polite. We want people to be critical. We want people to tell us the problems and issues and pain points that they've had with the portal. We are looking to do a pretty decent revamp of some pretty important front user-facing parts of the website, namely the dataset page, this calendar year. And so the more feedback that we get, the better product we can actually produce. Michael, thank you. Michael's put a link in the chat to that particular questionnaire. But if anyone's only got a phone or can't see the chat or prefers to do it on their phone, this QR code will also take you there.
I have another question regarding the same around data consumption by the end user, right? So I understand this is an open data set, but do we ask the users to just log in or create a profile? When they create a profile, no, nothing. Okay, so maybe that could be a potential entry point to capture some information without getting too much into the detail. Is there any restriction around that?
There isn't, and there's definitely no technology thing blocking us from doing that. We have considered that, and it's not entirely off the table. We do understand, though, that it's more work for the user if they have to set up an account, and they have to register, and they have to fill out another thing. So by default, we'd prefer people not to have to do that. They can just come, find what they're looking for, click download, or start hitting the API, and they're good.
Maybe if we can think of optionally, right? So for UI based download, don't ask anything, but when you go into the API and generate the API key, just ask them for additional information on how you're going to continuously use it, not to block it totally. Just some suggestions out of my mind.
No, and those are all fair suggestions. They're not actually the first time we've heard that. We were just at a meetup a couple weeks ago, and we had a couple people say the exact same thing. It's on the table for us. We want to be cautious about that type of thing because we don't want to add work to the user experience. So we kind of have to weigh the pros and cons of the damage to the user experience by requiring certain people to sign up to the benefits to us for our metrics. So we're thinking about it. But we haven't come to an answer yet.
Okay.
So I appreciate the feedback, though. I really do.
Sure. Are we just providing only today? We are providing only the static type of our data. The direction which I'm asking this question is, so do we also have a sort of a ML based, prediction based data that's been given? I'll give you an example, right? The transit. So the transit data, if it's getting updated every hardly once, what's the traffic index? It's a prediction based on various factors. So today, do we also provide such ML-based prediction data as part of this data set, or everything is just only the static access data?
Ooh, okay. So static is a loaded word. Short answer, I don't think we have anything on the portal that is ML-based. We've got plenty of things that have been plugged into models and used to do predictions, but we don't. And there might be one or two exceptions, but I cannot think of them, so I don't think that there are. I don't think we have any data sets up on the portal that are purely predictions of something. And that's kind of on purpose. We're really preferring to provide raw data to folks, just the records of stuff that actually happened, records that people actually wrote down in their machine or entered into their system or whatever, so that the public and other city divisions can then do whatever analysis or predictions or visualizations they want on top of that. We try to not process the data at all to enable others to take that foundation and build on top of it. So short answer, I don't think we do, and that's on purpose.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Hey Mac, another question. So what about citations and attributions? Do you think that would help at least the research portion of the data sets being used? Any sort of tracking on that?
Yeah, so that's another thing we're starting to chew on right now. We do know that people do cite in some cases when they're using our data. and that's great. That helps us find when people have used things that's on our portal. But the next step to that is how do we enforce or encourage that? And we've been thinking about ways to encourage and enable people to cite it, but we're definitely cautious to put ourselves in a position to require people to cite it. You
Yep.
know what I mean?
Yep. That's what the open is for, right?
Yeah, that's what the open's for exactly. But that said, your point about enabling people to cite things more easily, that's something that was, I think, also brought up recently. It's something that's that we've only really started thinking about like the last couple of weeks, months, really. So it's a new idea, and it's great to hear other people mentioning it. So thanks for bringing it up.
All right, that's great. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so there's a question that came in about 10 minutes ago. So I don't want to lose track because I can see
Yeah,
people are coming up with questions. So Moyo Taiwo is asking, I'll just read his question. It says, if I intend to use this in a policy article for public consumption, how should the, okay, it's related to attribution. So how should the attribution be done? Is there a standard for citing the data?
Yeah, Moyo, short answer, we don't have one right now. At least the open data team doesn't. Um, it's just as I was talking about a second ago. It's something we've only started to really scratch our heads on. That said, I do know that there are people who have cited us in different ways. I don't remember where I found them, but I know that they exist. So you might be able to steal a method that someone else has used.
Right. And there's one more question also from Elijah. So maybe I'll just read it so it makes it look like I'm asking it on his behalf. So it says, perhaps for each data, oh, maybe it's a suggestion. Perhaps for each data set, you could add checkboxes with the top 5 most relevant fields of study/work related to the data set. Like had a question of at the top of the page, reason for using the data set, then top 5 options. This could be made optional. It seems we all care about helping you get data about those of us who use your data.
Yeah, seriously. And that's actually so great to hear. Elijah, I appreciate the input, man. I'm copying and pasting that into a notepad right now. And it maybe when we actually get around to doing work on that, we'll put it on the table. I'll tell you that while it's something that bothers us, it's not something that's on in our backlog for the short term. So you might not see any changes to how we manage that stuff in the short term. Either way, appreciate the input, really do.
Okay, Jody is just saying he needs to join something else. I've got I've got a question based off while I was interacting with the portal, and so I noticed that there were files that were like in JSON, some were more relevant for GIS, some were um, well, the sections I moved more towards, I ended up with Excel files, and I wanted to ask, is there internally conversations around maybe trying to make a particular file type the recommended for the division so that I don't have an opinion about what it should be, but I'm just asking that for like the transit data, I also went on New York and I got the data, but I can't remember if it was a different format. But my direct question is there some internal best recommendation to the divisions that okay for this type of data, make it in this format. This is the format we feel is more relevant and easily useful for different categories of users. Just ask.
Yeah, no, Michael, that's a great question. The short answer is we've got we've got a lot of things that we allow. We've got things at the top of that list that we suggest, that we encourage users to do. But because there's so many different city divisions and each of the teams in those divisions have different technical abilities and tools that they have access to, sometimes they just aren't able to get into those ideal formats. And so we have to be flexible as an open data program and understand that we want to accept as much as we can and we want to encourage formats that we can work better with. But if we force people to follow those better formats, we lose a bunch of data sets because we know that there are certain teams and certain divisions that just cannot provide data in a different way. Part of the issue that I was alluding to around scaling ETLs and dealing with that variety is making it so that that list of the kinds, the formats of data sets that we can provide can be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, so that they can give us all kinds of different kinds of garbage, and we can still provide it to our usership in a standard 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different formats that people tend to like. Unfortunately, we don't want to, I should say, crack the whip and force people to say it has to, force our divisions to only provide us purely flat, unformatted CSV files, because some divisions can't do that. Some divisions are not working in a paradigm that allows that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. And there's a question from Renita, so I think it's a question. So I'll read it.
Yeah.
The person says, do you have incidents where users abuse the system, like requesting data in high frequency, and then added, perhaps you could have a higher limit for people who subscribe?
So right now we do, I think through like a load balancer or something, we do prevent people from like spamming requests to the site, if that's the first half of your question. We don't have any like stricter rate limits than that, although they're pretty strict. Like the second we know that you're being too spammy, you get blocked pretty hard. That said, yeah, we could possibly give people benefits if they register. But other than giving them like a higher like frequency allowance, there's only a handful of other benefits that we could give to them, and if we do that too much, then we're really taking things away in the user experience from the rest of our users, and we want to be cautious about that. That said, everybody, I really do appreciate everyone's concern about our inability to know who's using the data and how. I think that's actually really cool. This is the first time I've noticed that folks are so what's the word? Focused on making sure that people get recognized for the work that they're doing, and I think that's really cool and really important. I do see a message just came in from Mohit too, around a Power BI dashboard he made in 2018. Cool, thanks Mohit. I'll take a look later. Appreciate you sharing.
Thanks. I see we are almost 9, and Mackenzie, you've done a very great job. Thanks a lot. And if there are, just to ask, because again, I know you have other things, and this was the time slot we gave you in the calendar, so that we don't take more than what is necessary and what you. Okay. All right. So maybe I'll just take that as a cue to say, any more questions? Going 1, going 2.
I have one last one. Sorry if I'm. Of course, this was a great presentation, as someone was already saying. So my question would be like, sometimes if you have a newer source, right? How do you recognize for which ETL job it is for? How do you kind of manage all those things? Like, okay, for we are getting entirely new source for this particular ETL thing, and then you get entirely different. Do you get something like that, or it's always the same place gives you the same files, and you? I don't think so. That happens, right?
Oh yeah, we work with different sources pretty often, and how do we figure out what to grab and how? Conversations with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's half of our work is technical for sure. We've got 3 software developers on the team that manage the site and all the ETLs. A lot of our work is working with people. Is working with people who like live in the city. Sorry, who work at the city, who manage data, and talking to them to like make them comfortable about publishing their data and making sure they're okay with the methods with which we're going to extract that data. And half of the work is technical, but half of it is diplomacy and schmoozing. So the short answer to your question is like we have to talk to people. And talking to people is exhausting, but it's got to get done.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's the last question. So thank you very much. We're really grateful for the session, and as a feedback, I would say even in I think Katike is even saying it is surprised by how your focus is so much more on the user getting access to as much data as possible that the city can share. And in fact, being their advocates in the, internally with the divisions to ensure that if there's a case of the data being available versus, the data not being available, maybe due to systems and things that, you know, will probably hinder you from wanting to put it in a way that you want. You prioritize making the data available first, and the openness, even the slide you having to show us how the tech stack is like. And for me, I've gone ahead to Google and learn more about FME. I think I have not used it before. So again, thank you very much for this style of presentation. It shows that not just you, but also uh, it makes it to me that the city considers us as the ultimate users, the people to ensure that they get the most value out of what uh, the city is doing. And the City of Toronto Open Data Program is one of those tools. Like, you put us at the forefront, and to me, that is something I am happy that it's what's coming across to the rest of us. So much that we are wanting to help you to get details of those of us using the data.
Yeah.
you know, so thanks a lot, and I'm sure people also find this presentation really great. And for me, I know that I can keep telling people to, go to the City of Toronto Open Data Program to access this data, build more interesting projects. And when I go to, I'm part of some communities where university students and MBA students and master students are, and they are always, especially those in the data space, they are always looking for data sets to help them to align with some world usable projects, something that at least can also be built on top of what exists to achieve some social good. And that's what I found your the portal as making possible. I like the slide you shared where you showed the different categories of users that you have been able to identify. And I see that for many of us in this call, we will fall into some of those categories where either we are doing some research, we are trying to do a project, and we want to see how we can max out the good for people, and we want to see data to use to test out our hypothesis. So thank you very much, and I'll bring this session to a close now. And I wish everybody a good week ahead. And once again, thank you to your team too, because I think you mentioned some of them are here on the call. Maybe they've left, maybe they're still here, but I want to say a big thank you to them too. And thanks a lot for the opportunity and coming up to present to us here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the time.
Bye. Have a good day and week ahead. I mean, good rest of the day and week ahead.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Take care. Appreciate it, Michael. I really appreciate it. I'll be in touch a little bit after this just so we can debrief. But thanks for the time,
Okay,
man. Have a
cool.
great night.
Yes. Bye. Thanks.